You've made the decision that you want to learn more about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and generative AI. You finally figured out how you're going to do it. You're going to pursue the AWS Certified AI Practitioner. What you don't know right now is how difficult is this certification. Well, in this video, I'm going to go over how difficult is AWS Certified AI Practitioner. Now, if you're new here, I'm Greg, creator of Thoughtful Techie Cloud, and each week I'm creating a video to help you navigate your AWS cloud and tech journey. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe right now. What I like to do is start off with what I call the AWS certification hierarchy. Now, it's important to note where the AWS AI Practitioner certification falls under this hierarchy. So there's 4 levels of this. There's foundational, which are knowledge-based certifications for foundational understanding. This is where the AI practitioner sits. Then there's the associate, where not only are you just focused on learning the knowledge, but now you're stepping into the role of a particular career. So that could be a SysOps administrator, a developer, a solution architect, data engineer, or machine learning engineer with respect to the certifications that AWS offers. Once you step up to the professional level, it's like associate. However, the problem sets that you're expected to solve are going to be on the more advanced level. And then the last is specialty, which is where you dive deeper into a specific domain. In this case, could be advanced networking, machine learning, and security. Now, AWS has had a foundational certification for several years, cloud practitioner, right? AI practitioner, the distinction I want to make is cloud practitioner is fundamental knowledge and teaching you the ropes about AWS. Once you step into AI practitioner, it's less about AWS fundamentals and it's more in line with fundamentals as it relates to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and generative AI. And these topics tend to be more complex just by the very nature of it than, for example, learning the fundamentals of AWS. Now, I'm going to take you like from a 0 to 60, and we're going to ease into this in that manner. So the next step is to go to the AWS Certified AI Practitioner exam landing page. And not to worry, because below I'm going to put all the links to all the topics that I'm going to be covering here. I do want to tease this real quick. Not only are we going to go over the complexity and difficulty of this certification, but I'm going to include a strategy or a plan for how you can approach this. Again, it's a foundational certification. As AWS states here, that this certification is going to validate in-demand knowledge of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and generative AI concepts and use cases. And this is going to sharpen your competitive edge and position you for career growth and high earnings. Now, I'm all about that. So this is going to put you on the right path. Now, this exam started off in a beta phase. That beta phase has concluded. Exam duration is 90 minutes. So we have 65 questions. So we don't have a lot of time to answer those questions within that 90-minute period. For example, if you were to get stuck on one. So you want to keep a nice pace. The cost for the exam is $100 USD. And then the intended candidates here will be individuals who are familiar with, but not necessarily building these solutions using AI and ML technologies on AWS. Now, they list some candidate roles here, which would include, for example, business analyst, IT support, marketing professional, product or product manager, line of business or IT manager, or sales professional. But I would say, in my humble opinion, if you are none of these, but you have a genuine interest in these technologies, the AWS Certified AI Practitioner would be a great place to start. Now, let's cover some key frequently asked questions about this certification, which I think will help you. Who should earn the AWS Certified AI Practitioner? AWS lets us know that the ideal candidate for this exam is going to be familiar with AI and ML technologies on AWS and its uses. So I'll take myself as an example. I've been working with AI and ML for a few years. on AWS. And then once we stepped into generative AI, I started working on that in 2023. So somebody like me who does this would be an ideal candidate for this. And certified individuals holding the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner or an associate level AWS certification do not need to take the foundational cloud courses and can start with the free AI foundational training also included in the exam prep plans. I'll go over that a little bit more as we advance along and explain some of that training there. Now, let's minimize this. How will the AWS Certified AI Practitioner help your career? So again, if you're in sales and marketing and product management, it's going to better position you to be able to have those conversations. And you're in meetings, understand what's going on, and you're going to have a credential that's going to boost your confidence versus being unfamiliar with these technologies and getting a bit stressed out when people are talking about things like hallucination and large language models and foundation models and different algorithms. Okay, let's minimize this. How is the AWS Certified AI Practitioner different from the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner? Now, this is where you're going to begin to understand why this certification is a degree more difficult than just a cloud practitioner. So cloud practitioner is going to focus on overall knowledge of AWS cloud, give you that foundational level overview of AWS services. Once we step into the AWS Certified AI Practitioner, this is going to cover a wide range of AI frameworks, concepts, and associated AWS technologies that operate within the domain of AI, machine learning, and generative AI. So if you're completely new to that, this is what makes this a little bit more difficult. Now, if you're already in the AI and ML space or you're a data scientist, your path here to get this certification may be a little bit more straightforward than, say, somebody that has no background in these technologies at all. And now, what should you do after you earn the AWS Certified AI Practitioner? A lot of that depends on you. It's recommended that if you don't already have the AWS Certified Solutions Architect, this would be a nice path because this is going to teach you essentially how to build AWS architectures from a best practices standpoint on AWS. That would cover things like security, cost optimization, operational excellence, reliability, performance, and sustainability. If you already have that, you can ask yourself, okay, do you want to deep dive more into a data path? For example, the AWS Certified Data Engineer Associate may be right up your lane there. Or you might want to jump directly from this to go to the AWS Certified Machine Learning Engineer Associate. If you have questions on this, go ahead and jot those in the comments below. I love answering your comments and questions there to help give you some insight on the direction you should take forward. And then if you're curious about how long this certification lasts, it's valid for 3 years. All right. So a big part of understanding about this certification is to download the exam guide. And I'll include this in the link in the description below. So this is going to go into more depth on things that we've talked about here earlier. So again, this exam is intended for individuals who can effectively demonstrate their overall knowledge of AI, ML, generative AI technologies, and the associated AWS services and tools independent of a specific job role. Earlier, we were talking about that certification hierarchy. This is a foundational certification, not to be confused with this is going to be easy, because that's not going to be the case. At the same time, you're following along with what I'm going over here and the plan that I'll share with you a little bit later. This will make your preparation more straightforward and help you to be able to go into the exam more confident. All right. So the exam is going to validate a candidate's ability to complete the following task. So you're going to need to understand AI, ML, and generative AI concepts, methods, and strategies in general on AWS. Understand appropriate use of AI, ML, and generative AI technologies to ask relevant questions within the candidate's organization. So what this certification is doing is it's educating you about the various AI, ML, and generative AI technologies, and for you to use your newfound knowledge to be able to figure out, okay, what is the right tool? What is the right algorithm? What is the next step forward for you to approach like a given use case? You're going to be able to determine the correct types of AI, ML technologies to apply to those specific use cases, as I was mentioning. And there's a focus on using AI, machine learning, and generative AI technologies responsibly. Now, this is a little bit of a deeper dive into the target candidate description. The recommendation here is to have up to 6 months of exposure to AI, ML technologies on AWS. Now, if you have more than 6 months of exposure to these technologies, all the better for you. The recommended AWS knowledge that the target candidate should have should be the following. You should have a familiarity with core AWS services like Amazon EC2, Amazon S3, Lambda, and SageMaker. You should have familiarity with the AWS Shared Responsibility Model for security and compliance in AWS Cloud. Familiarity with identity and access management for securing and controlling access to your AWS Cloud resources. Familiarity with AWS global infrastructure, including the concepts of AWS regions, availability zones, and edge locations. And familiarity with AWS service pricing models. Now, if any of this doesn't sound familiar to you, this is where going down the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner path would help you out greatly. And I do have videos on that you can watch after you watch this video in its entirety. Now let's take a look at what's out of scope for the target candidate on this exam. You're not going to need to develop or code any AI models or algorithms. You're not going to need to implement any data engineering or feature engineering techniques. You're not going to be performing any hyperparameter tuning. You don't need to build or deploy any AI, ML pipelines or infrastructure or conduct mathematical statistical analysis. Thank goodness for that, because that sounds very difficult. You don't need to concern yourself with implementing security or compliance protocols for AI, ML systems. And you don't need to worry about developing or implementing governance frameworks or policies for AI, ML solutions. Now, let's get more so into the exam content and the question types. One of the things I would say that takes up the difficulty of the AWS Certified AI Practitioner is that additional question formats have been introduced. I'll start out with the question formats that have been around for a while. Multiple choice, very straightforward. You pick one correct response out of 4 answer choices, right? So you have one correct, then you have 3 distractors. The distractors are answers that seem like they're right, but something about them is wrong. Multiple response has also been around for a while. This is where the question will indicate to pick 2 or more correct answers out of 5 or more total responses. Now, I don't know about you, but multiple response questions for me have always been a little bit more difficult, because if it says pick 2, you're like, okay, I got one here. What's the other one? And then if I get one wrong, it can get a bit confusing. But if you prepare well, you'll be able to sift through and find those distractors and then zoom in on those right questions. Now, for the next 3, these are new question formats that were debuted in the AWS Certified AI Practitioner, as well as the AWS Machine Learning Engineer Associate. Now, ordering questions will be where you take 3 to 5 responses, and you'll need to select the correct responses and place those responses in a specific order to receive credit. So it's just putting things in a sequence or an order. You'll also have a matching type questions, and this will be a list of responses that you'll need to match between 3 to 7 prompts. So you must match all the pairs correctly to receive credit for the question. And then you'll have a case study, which is a scenario, and it'll have 2 or more questions about the scenario. The scenario for every question is the same, right? And then they'll ask you questions that'll map back to the same scenario. So each question in the case study will be evaluated separately, and you will receive credit for each question that you answer correctly in the case study. So you could have a mix of up to 5 different question formats on the exam. So this would inherently make this exam in my humble opinion, a little bit more challenging. And the folks that speak with me that have taken this, they also tell me, oh, wow, this was foundational. I had my cloud practitioner. I was thinking this thing was going to be a little bit more straightforward. But you have to think from the perspective of this is foundational as it relates to AI, ML, and generative AI, not necessarily the foundations of AWS. Now, you will have a total of 65 questions. The exam includes only 50 questions that will affect your score. What that means is there's unscored content on this exam, 15 to be exact, because you get the 50 plus the 15, so that's 65. So you see, I can do math there. Now, the thing is, you're not going to know which 15 questions are going to be unscored. If you're lucky and you missed 15 questions and it just happened to be these 15 unscored questions, then you'd be okay. So long story short, you need to put forth your best effort to get through these. Now let's talk about the exam result. Your results for the exam are reported as a scaled score between 100 to 1,000. The minimum passing score is 700. So that's primarily what you need to know. As long as you get that 700 and higher, you're golden on this thing, all right? And then if you've taken AWS certs before, you know that it does take some time for AWS to send you your results. When I took this certification, it took about, I think I had my results in 24 hours. So I took my exam on a Friday, and then I was biting my nails for around a little less than 24 hours. Was I biting my nails? No, I wasn't. I had a good gut instinct that I would pass it, and the results came in, and I did. So I am hoping the same for you as well. What I want to go over now here is a high-level course outline. And every AWS certification has what are called domains, and these are the areas of content that will be focused, or you need to focus on to be able to prepare and for that exam. So the AWS AI Practitioner has 5 domains. So the breadth of the content that is covered on this thing is quite vast. Domain 1 is the fundamentals of AI and ML, and that's representative of 20% of scored content. And what that means is roughly about 20% of questions that would appear in your set of questions would align to this domain 1. Domain 2 is fundamentals of generative AI. That's going to be 24% of scored content. Domain 3 is applications of foundation models, worth 28% of scored content. That is quite weighty, slightly less than 1/3. Definitely something you want to be prepared for. Domain 4 talks about guidelines for responsible AI. And then that's representative of 14% of scored content. And then domain 5 is security, compliance, and governance for those AI solutions, representative of 14% of the scored content. Now, what I want to show you here is that within each domain, there are what's called task statements. And these task statements align to the domains, but they further break down what specifically in that domain you need to cover. So task statement 1.1 is explaining the basic AI concepts and terminologies. So this will be things like AI terms like AI, ML, deep learning, neural networks, computer vision, natural language processing, models, algorithms, training, inference, bias, fairness, fit, large language models. You are understanding what these things are and gaining and comparing and contrasting and understanding, okay, what's AI, what's ML, like how does that look from a hierarchy standpoint? Describing the similarities and differences between AI, ML, and deep learning. Notice how we are drilling down a little bit deeper in these bullet points. Third bullet point here is describing various types of inferencing. For example, batch versus real time. Now, I'm not going to go over line by line in each of these tasks, but I just want to show you the overall mechanics of how this looks. And without question, this is not optional, in my opinion. You want to go through this exam guide and read it. It's okay if you don't understand everything, because I'm going to point you to some training that's going to help you familiarize yourself more. I'm just going to go through another couple of task statements just at the top level, not all the sub-bullets. Task statement 1.2, identify practical uses for AI. Task statement 1.3, describe the ML development lifecycle. And then the objectives, again, go over this very detailed. Now, the training I'm going to show you is literally aligned really nicely to the exam guide, where they have everything separated by domain. And then the training has videos for each task, giving you the knowledge you need to be able to cover these topics. And let's see here. And then domain 2, we just spill into fundamentals of generative AI, and then you go through those respective task statements here. Definitely, you want to go through this from start to finish. Now, for the training that I mentioned here, there's a lot of training out there. I want to highlight one here, and this is going to be from AWS Skill Builder. If you are not familiar with AWS Skill Builder, is a very comprehensive training platform that covers a vast amount of information that is aligned to certifications, learning plans, knowledge badges, and different things that you can go through. It has cloud quests, which are three-dimensional games that allow you to be able to play a game and learn AWS concepts. I'm going to highlight your attention through the plan here for the AWS Certified AI Practitioner. Now, I know the first thing you see over there is that $29 a month. However, I am going to highlight a lot of the free options that you can take. And that's going to be starting with step 1, getting to know the exam style questions. So there are something called exam prep plans that AWS Training and Certification does an excellent job putting together. There's a standard plan and an enhanced plan. So the standard plan is going to be the free one. This is going to cover the training that I was mentioning, where you'll have a trainer based on a video that goes through all the domains, all the tasks, and take you through walkthrough questions that you can try. There's also going to be an exam prep official practice question set. This is going to be 20 questions that would give you, demonstrate the style for the certification questions that you would expect on your AWS AI practitioner. Okay. Now, within these exam prep programs, there's going to be refreshing your AWS knowledge and skills. This is going to be a list, I think it's slightly over 10 additional individual digital courses that are going to be above and beyond that exam prep one that I just outlined above. These are also free. If you're coming in and you don't have fundamentals of machine learning and artificial intelligence, this course would be great. Exploring artificial intelligence use cases and applications, responsible artificial intelligence practices. I would highly recommend that if you have not been working in the AI and ML field for any length of time, especially if it's less than 6 months, go through each of these training classes here. This is going to be above and beyond, in addition to the exam prep training that I mentioned above. It's going to be incredibly helpful, okay? Now let me scroll down here to review and practice for your exam. The exam prep standard course does have some walkthrough questions that you can go through. Now, me personally, I went for the exam prep enhanced course. It does require a Skill Builder subscription, so there is a cost for that. However, this is what it gets you extra. In addition to the training that I mentioned earlier, right? Above and beyond that, you get additional bonus questions for each domain. You also get access to a full-length 65-question pre-test, which does a really nice job of simulating what the real test would be like. I would tell you from my experience in using the enhanced prep training program, the questions I felt helped me out greatly, because it's one thing to learn about a topic, and that's great, but to be able to go through those practice questions and strengthening your reading and comprehension, being able to look at those different question types, the multiple choice, the multiple response, the ordering, the matching, and the case studies. Like, if you haven't done any practice questions and you're just going in there cold turkey for the first time on the real exam, it's gonna be like a little bit stressful to try to navigate that. So definitely, if you can go for it, go for that enhanced course. I'd highly recommend it, because the last thing you want to do is like go into the exam not prepared, fail it, because that's going to be like a shot to the confidence, and it's just not a good look. So that's the path I would take. One other thing I would point out that the enhanced prep would give you, and that's because you would have access, you would have that AWS Skill Builder subscription, is that when they recommend hands-on labs within that exam prep training, now, because you have that Skill Builder subscription, you're going to be able to take those hands-on labs and do those all-inclusive of the AWS Skill Builder subscription. The other thing that that enhanced program will give you with the AWS Skill Builder subscription is that you'll have access to this three-dimensional game. It's called AWS Escape Room for AWS Certified AI Practitioner, and I really enjoyed this big time. It's literally like an escape room, right? And I think there's about 5 levels, and there's different characters in there. I don't want to spoil it, but this would also be as a part of that subscription. And it's a fun game. I'm telling you, if you haven't played one of these before, it's really fun. And in order to advance in the game, you have to solve riddles and answer questions. And guess what? Those riddles and questions are aligned to the AWS AI Practitioner curriculum. So it's really a great path forward. Now you have everything you need to get started on your journey. And I would suggest, if you haven't already, take a look at this video right here, as I think you'll be interested. And I'll see you in the next video.